Hello, welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network. I'm Rick Anthony. Today we will answer the question, how do you spot an honest-to-God entrepreneur? And a related question, can a corporate executive with years of experience surviving and thriving in a bureaucracy make it as an entrepreneur? To help with the answers, I've invited a colleague, longtime friend, Alan Kaplan, founder and CEO of Kaplan Partners, a retained executive search firm and talent advisory firm headquartered in Philadelphia. Kaplan Partners works with boards, investors, and CEOs to help growing companies succeed, providing advice on the identification and evaluation of prospective CEOs, directors, and senior operating executives. Alan, a pleasure to see you again.
Likewise.
We see one another all too infrequently, I think.
It's true.
But I know what you're doing because I hear from other people. Welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network.
Thanks for having me.
This is, I think, a particularly timely question because millennials are coming into the workforce. They're certainly coming into the entrepreneurial community. And they're a different breed than their predecessors, particularly baby boomers, who are just as active, as you probably know. According to the Kaplan Foundation, the greatest level of activity of starting new businesses over the past few years has been between the ages of 55 and 64. So there's something going on out there. And it's not just because they can't find work, although that's true in many cases,
Right.
but they are attracted to this notion of entrepreneurship. And even the concept is changing. I'm going off on a tangent, so let's get back to the subject. You've been at this since 1994 when you started your own firm, but your experience as a recruiter predates you starting your own firm. What were you doing before Kaplan Partners?
Well, I started my career right out of college in corporate banking, actually. I spent about 3.5 years, doing corporate lending to companies and decided that I really liked the industry, but didn't want to be a banker directly. So I actually went into the recruiting business. It was 28 years ago this past Labor Day.
Why recruiting?
There was something about what I sort of refer to as that corporate matchmaking thing, right? You're trying to match up a need on the corporate side with a person, and it's the only field that I've really seen where the solution to the client problem is a person that has an opinion about whether they want to be the one to solve that problem or deal with that issue or join that organization. So I guess I found it fascinating. I remember in college reading an article in Business Week about recruiters, and I thought, oh, that kind of corporate matchmaking thing just intrigued me. And then I knew somebody who'd gone from banking into recruiting, and that's how it started 28 years ago.
Why didn't you just join one of the large firms?
Well, I started,
at least for a while.
Well, I did work for 2 different recruiting firms. One was a 40-office company, had franchises all over the country, which is now not in existence any longer, but had a great training program, worked with some really good people there. For 5 years, gave me a foundation. Then I worked for another retained executive search firm for a couple of years to sort of elevate the practice because I really wanted to do higher level search work. And then was young and foolish and told my wife on the plane ride home from the honeymoon I was going to quit my job and start my own company. And then she ordered another cocktail. True story. She likes to tell it.
And did it take off immediately? Were you lucky enough to hit it at the right time?
This was May 1st of 1994, 21 years plus from now. And we did get lucky. We had some good relationships that I built over time and literally started in the 2nd bedroom of my townhouse in Center City, Philadelphia. And thankfully didn't need to make a lot of money in order to pay the rent. So we had a couple of relationships that fairly early on gave us an opportunity, and we were hungry, I was hungry, and a couple checks came in and we were off to the races. And I've always been, as you know, like you, kind of out there, always sensitive to the importance of network and relationships, which drives our business. And I've never stopped that.
That's how we first met.
Correct.
It was around 2000, I think.
I think through the Entrepreneurs Forum.
Before the bubble burst. And you were very active in the entrepreneurial community back then. You were one of the leaders. And that, just as you said, you were everywhere, and you still are. But what attracted you to the entrepreneurial community? And did you really think you could build a business with people who have no money?
Well, I've learned some lessons about that, but I was attracted for 2 reasons. One is, as a budding entrepreneur myself, I wanted to plug into the vast array of resources and professionals that had experience starting all sorts of different kinds of businesses, including the lawyers and accountants and other professionals to get guidance. So I learned a lot in those early years of my company from other entrepreneurs and people in that world. And then secondly, wanted to see if I could help entrepreneurs. I like the concept of working with young, growing companies and helping them figure out, because so many of them are focused on a product or a technology, or they're opening a restaurant or a store, but they're not necessarily thinking about, all right, but I'm going to need people, right? Whether it's a high growth internet company and I'm going to need some technological gurus, whether I'm opening a restaurant and I need really good service staff. So trying to work with those folks and provide a little guidance to them. Also just felt something I was passionate about and really wanted to do. You highlighted what I think the challenge is in many of those young companies, unless they're sort of venture capital worthy, don't really have the money to fund, to support and hire a company.
They're the ones I deal with.
Like ours, right? Now we do work with those clients, but we still want to get paid. So we still have early stage companies, but typically they have at least some angel funding in them. That is directed specifically towards adding a senior level executive. And if I can sort of opine on this for just 1 second, I think one of the great shames that I've seen in the entrepreneur community over the years is entrepreneurs with a good idea, brilliant technologically, or have a great idea, but they won't share power, right? They can't let go or bring someone in who's a business person to help them grow the business, fine-tune the strategy, raise some capital, take to the next level, because they're afraid, well, I want to control this whole thing. And my view is, well, 90% of something that's not worth much is not as good as owning 50 or 20% of something worth millions of dollars. But there's a lot of ego.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, and that's a shame.
And that hasn't changed.
I don't think so.
I think it's as true today as it was back 2000.
Yeah.
I had a thought and I lost it, but the point is, it was an investor, and I don't remember if it was an angel or a VC, probably an angel, who to corroborate your point. He was talking about, we were talking about, what do you look at? What do you look for if you're thinking about investing? And to your point, good ideas certainly,
right?
But it's the quality of the people and the ability of the entrepreneur to attract and build a team. Now, in my experience, the first person usually hired by an early stage company, particularly a first-time entrepreneur, is a disaster. It's the wrong person. You pay too much, you give away too much equity, you live to regret it, and then you have investors who say, how could you have made that stupid mistake? And they have to live with that for a very long time. You're not necessarily the solution because they can't afford you, but there are other options they have to help them make the right choices, right?
Sure, absolutely. I think that classic mistake is sometimes the entrepreneur hires, they look in the mirror and they say, well, I want someone just like me. When in reality, they probably need somebody with complementary skills. The culture still has to match, right? As we know, that's always the inflection point where things can go off the rails, even if the skill match is good. But I think there's a lot of early stage hiring of people like me as the founder, as opposed to people who complement me in skills and experiences. And especially if you're a rookie entrepreneur, even though you're passionate, we'll get people who've done the entrepreneurial thing previously that understand the heavy lifting and what it's like in these young companies to actually try to grow the organization.
Yours is I would call it a boutique firm.
Correct.
And you have over the years evolved and now specialize in financial services principally?
Well, we do, most of the things that we do touch some element of the financial community, which would include the venture capital and private equity, high growth company community. Those are financial sponsors essentially. So that's a core part of our business. And then another significant core of our business is in financial services. So we work with banks, money management firms, a little bit of insurance, et cetera, a little bit of credit unions. And then we also do a lot of corporate finance work. So corporate CFOs, which can cross any industry. And we do that as well.
How did you get through 2007, 8, 9, 10?
So our big down year, if I recall, was actually 2007, where we took about a 30% drop in revenue, which was significant, as you know. Not as significant as some other firms, both in the industry and in general, went through. And we were maybe flatter up a little bit in 2008, then we started to come back in 2009, 10, and the last 3 years have been the best 3 years in the 21-year history of our firm. And knock on wood, I think we're on pace for that this year. But what got us through that, I think, was being lean. We've always been a virtual company. We have 6 people in our firm today, and we've never had a lot of overhead, which has been helpful. And I guess on a personal level, we're pretty conservative people, so we've kind of built our own fortress balance sheet, so that if that kind of day ever came, as it did in 2007, 2008, and even if you go back further in the post 9/11 / tech bubble burst in
Yes,
2000,
I
2001,
remember it well.
2002,
Yes.
you know, that we were, you know, going to be able to survive as a family and continue to go forward as a business. So, you know, we were sort of planning for the worst, hoping for the best. So that worked out okay, thankfully.
But business is solid now?
Business has been great.
That's
Thank
great.
you. Yeah, there's a lot of talent issues out there, which I'm sure we'll talk
There
about.
are. Let's see if we can start talking about at least the entrepreneur. So the first question is, can you spot an entrepreneur, a prospective entrepreneur? What is it about an individual that screams out and says, I'm going to make it?
There's a certain DNA, I think, of the entrepreneur, and there's a lot of things that go into that. You know, some of it is just the genuine passion. Some of it is a willingness to take risks, not necessarily foolishly, but they know they're taking a risk. In most cases, first-time entrepreneurs taking a personal financial risk.
Yes.
There's the clarity of purpose, I think, around the vision of what they're trying to really accomplish. So there are certain traits that I think you have to have, and the willingness to roll up your sleeves regardless. You know, so if you come out of a large company and you've always had many minions working for you, do you really have the DNA? Can you really roll up your sleeves? Everybody thinks they can,
Yes.
but do you actually remember how to do that? And are you willing to do it? And then on top of all that, you still have to have a good idea. You have to have a good business model. But I think, you know, the history is littered with good business plans that were really poorly managed, poorly executed, poorly implemented, that went nowhere, versus, you know, an average plan that was really well executed often wins in those situations because it's got the team and it's got the right kind of nucleus of people around it to make it go forward.
You kind of touched on the second question as well. Can a corporate, particularly a corporate executive who has had all of the accoutrements of the executive level, people reporting to them who take care of their personal as well as their professional needs, et cetera, can that person make the transition to taking care of the mail, answering the phone, doing all of the things you have to do with a startup?
You know, honestly, again, I think it comes down to the person and their DNA. So I wouldn't make an absolute statement and say no. I would say it really depends on their ability to roll up their sleeves and their willingness to do all those things. You know, we see a lot of people who, let's say they started in a small entrepreneurial company as an engineer, and that company got sold to a bigger middle market company, and then 8 or 10 years later, that company gets sold to a mega company, right? So now they're maybe a senior executive in a multi-million-dollar company, but they're yearning to get back to that the organizational role 20 years ago. So they look like a big company person, but their DNA is really not. They've just either stayed there or been trapped there because the opportunity to stay there was financially rewarding, or they got great experience, but they always knew they were going to go back. And some people are absolutely just not cut out for that. They need the infrastructure and the safety net. Part of our job and your job is you have to help parse through that if you're coaching entrepreneurs or assessing prospective candidates for entrepreneurial companies.
You do a lot of advisory work as well, in addition to placing people. Are there many situations where you are advising a client, a corporate executive, former corporate executive, unencumbered by employment maybe, who says, I think I want to buy a franchise, I think I want to start my own company, and you advise against it? And do you use assessment tools, by the way? Or do you rely on your own intuition?
Two separate questions. So the entrepreneur who says, or the executive who says, I want to be an entrepreneur, you know, buy a franchise, start something.
Right.
On the rare occasion people ask for advice, I you know, based on my experience with them, and that I'll give them perspective of what I think. And more often than not, it's, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? You know, a variety of risks, a variety of dynamics around how they have to operate. You know, the financial cost, the time involved, you know, to get a sense for, is this what you really want? Does it sound good? Because I think the worst thing is to be the accidental entrepreneur. You do it because you don't know what else to do, or you can't get the job.
Yes.
And your combination of your heart's not in it and your DNA is not right for it, probably not going to be successful. And there are assessment tools that, to your second question, that would ferret those things out in many other traits. So we've actually just started using an assessment tool within our firm called the Predictive Index. We literally have started it this fall, and using it on either management assessment work that we do for clients, or baking it into the interview process as another data point for clients. A lot of our clients do their own testing anyway, so they may or may not be as interested in what this particular tool would do. It's a highly validated tool. It's a 5 or 10 minute online thing. It's surprisingly accurate. We've all done it in our team. But it's another data point, and what we found is it gives us a little validation and a little bit of extra sense for, yeah, this is an area we want to probe in the interview process or in some follow-up conversations. It's not changing our opinion and instinct. You know, everybody on our team has interviewed thousands of candidates over the years, typically in those 3 or 4 areas you mentioned before. So we usually have a pretty good feel for what we're looking for. Yeah, it's more almost about learning the client culture and environment they're going to go into, because we can assess the competency around the skills, but now it's the fit and the leadership capabilities and those things and the intangibles that we try to spend
Let me
a lot of
ask you
time
an unfair question.
Uh-oh.
You've placed how many CEOs over the years? Or C-level people?
Hundreds of C-level and over 60 CEOs, many in public companies.
All right. And what's your track record?
To CEO level, 97% stick rate after 3 years, probably closer to 4 years. It's exceptionally high and well above the industry norm. Thank you for asking.
Obviously, because
Well,
you're good.
yeah, because they hire us.
Yeah.
If you would ask me the most defining thing that we think attributes that, it's that we really want to understand the client culture.
Yes.
And every client says, as you know, our culture is really unique, it's really
Yes.
special. And we
Yes.
say, great, we need to know, what does that actually mean, right? How do decisions get made? What's it like to work for the CEO? Is the senior team collaborative? Is it actually competitive? Is there a dynamic there that we need to be aware of, good, bad, or just be aware of, that
Yeah.
what's going to succeed? And by the way, if this is a CEO role, there's a boardroom culture, which may be separate and distinct, or a subset of the corporate culture. So we think that not being afraid to say to a good candidate, you're awesome for this role, but we don't think it's going to fit, and here's why, or say that to the client.
Yes.
Because the fit is what makes people stick. At that level, they're not going to get hired if they're incompetent. They're not going to get to that level, right? It's the fit piece that's so important, and we really want the time with the client on the front end. That, I think, is the single biggest factor of, I can go on about others in that regard.
It's a complicated process. I may have mentioned this to you before. I think I've mentioned it on this program before. When I was with a large consulting firm, my last assignment was staffing and training, development. So I had 6 recruiters reporting to me. It is a thankless job because, to your point, if, as you know, you sit first with your client or the hiring manager, give me a job description, let's be sure we understand what we're talking about. And what invariably happens, at least it did to me, and to the 6 people who reported to me, and they were all good, they change the specs.
Sure, all the time.
All the time. And they're not even, in many cases, they're not even aware that they've changed the specs, and therefore their expectations and the criteria they have in their minds about what a candidate should look like. But they never share that with you. So you're still going down this path.
Right.
They're over here. How do you pull them back? And what are the checkpoints to make sure that you're still aligned with or that your client is aligned with you?
Sure, there's a lot of mission creep in this
Yeah,
business,
yeah,
absolutely. And look, even clients that hire us for public company CEO searches, and these are theoretically sophisticated board members.
Yes.
Sometimes they still say one thing and they actually respond to
they've
another.
got big egos, and they think they know exactly what you should be doing.
That's right. In some cases they do. Some cases they're surprisingly not aware of what they should be doing. So it takes all kinds. We see all different kind of scenarios. So again, we run a process when I know we're talking about search now for a second. We run a process, and that process includes a lot of touch points along the way. Once we do that kickoff, that deep due diligence dive with the client around the company, the role, and the culture.
Right.
And then, I'd say initially, maybe every other week, we're having a kind of a touch point conversation on the profiles that we're looking at, people that we're considering, and meshing, trying to sort of check it along the way until we get to the point where we're ready to introduce candidates into the client. Then obviously becomes a much more real exercise. But we are testing for that a little bit along the way. And of course, we're showing the client a variety of people. They're all people, but slightly different profiles and backgrounds, a little stronger in this, a little less strong in that, so they can figure out, because the client learns a lot through the interview process.
Is that process taking longer than it used to? And second part of the question, is there an adequate talent pool to draw from these days? Because I keep hearing and reading that we have a dearth of really good executive leadership talent in this country.
Sure.
And around the world. But
Sure. Yeah. No, I think we are. From a timeline perspective, the benchmark for retained searches in this country has always been around 90 days. And I'd say our average probably is a little bit less than that, which is good. But there are plenty of searches, especially CEO searches, that take longer. Some of it's a function of the nature of the search and the client, right? So if the client executive, the hiring executives are traveling extensively, if the candidates are traveling extensively, weeks can go by between stages of interview, especially in a national search. So that can extend the timeline. I generally think right now, because the talent market's generally hot, we're at 5.1 or 5.2 unemployment in this country, which is,
I don't believe that number, neither do
I don't
you.
believe the number either, but that's the official quoted number, which when I was an economics major in college was full employment, right?
Exactly.
But nonetheless, the market for executive talent across industries has tightened up a lot. The best people, regardless of the industry, are being incentivized to stay financially, opportunistically.
Yes.
And they have the most choice, and they're being choosy. So all of my clients, including we have an alliance with 8 other boutique search firms around the country, all my colleagues, we're all experiencing that it's getting harder to close searches because the A players have more choice, and there, of course, are more people searching for A talent today. So searches are taking a little bit longer. And one interesting comment that one of my colleagues made, Rick, they said, people aren't relocating as much for jobs.
Yes.
Jobs are relocating more for people. So more virtual work becoming kind of mainstream at C-levels. I don't love it in every situation. Some roles, I think you can't do it. I think your corporate CFO has to be at headquarters. That's my view, right?
Yes.
Et cetera. But you're in sales, you're in marketing and operations, and you're moving around between facilities or clients regularly. Maybe it doesn't matter where you live. There are some industries, pharmaceutical salespeople have been distributed all over the country for decades. So,
but we'll talk to that. Tonight, I teach a course on managing the multi-generational workforce at Villanova. And tonight, the topic is the future of work, the workplace, and the workforce. And in the research I've been doing, it's absolutely scary because it's happening so quickly. And there are nuances that are developing that you just aren't aware of until they're called to your attention or you take the time to examine what's going on. I am concerned about boomers who will not be able to adapt because it's happening. They're going to be swept up in this. And I'm concerned about millennials who, although they're wired for all of this, are now an overload. They just cannot process all of this information. And they haven't learned, as boomers did, how to step back, take a deep breath, and let's look at the situation, analyze it, and then figure out how to manage it or get around it. They just don't have those skills. I don't know your opinion of them, but millennials are impatient, think they know everything, and just want to get on with it.
Well, I think, first of all, I think the information overload concept that you bring up, I think is a huge issue in society and in business in general that people really are not very often talking about.
Yep.
I mean, I think we all feel the stress from, oh my God, I got another email, another text, another email, another text, 100, 200, 300 more a day, and the feeling that we have to respond to all those interruptions, which we don't. So, I mean, there's a whole issue, and I think there's a lot of companies, and I just actually wrote a column talking about this for Smart CEO magazine. People are actually saying, we need to call timeouts during the workday for people to not be responding to email or text, to focus on their core activity, and we need to rethink how we do that.
You know how many articles have been written on that subject? A bazillion. You know how many people don't do?
A bazillion.
A bazillion.
Exactly. But to your point about millennials and younger generations, they're smart, they're technologically savvy. When you put them on a task, if it's a task of interest to them, I mean, they'll run through walls. But if they don't like it, they may pick up their marbles and want to go play with somebody else, right?
Exactly.
So that's the challenge. And as we talked earlier, there are 3 or 4 generations working in these companies. When you have these the boomers or the tail end of the greatest generation, veteran engineers or technologists who've been in companies, especially like aerospace defense industries, they have so much knowledge, and these companies are scrambling to take this knowledge from these 65, 70, 75-year-old people in some cases that is going to be lost, and try to impart that onto younger generations. But it's also a challenge for the manager, right? So you hire a 40, 45, 50-year-old division president or manager of a plant, or they're running a group in a bank, whatever it is, and they've got 60, 65-year-old veteran people with great expertise working for them. They've got peers they've been promoted over who could be either late boomers or Gen Xers, and then they've got the next generation, young people, 20s and 30s, and they all want different things from their work. And trying to get those to harmonize and work well together is a real challenge, and really requires the training of the manager, of whatever level that manager is, I think, to make that work.
Right, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Because most don't know how to handle
And when you have
those differences.
And as you know, when you've got high potential people, the thing that puts them both at risk is both the lack of personal involvement from their boss, or working for somebody who's not focusing on them and their career.
Yes.
Because, like it or not, they're focused on their own career.
Yes.
And to ignore that is to put them at risk
Well,
for leaving.
there's this whole new notion about your personal brand. That's being written about now.
Sure.
And which is kind of an extension of something that happened several years ago when I was with a large firm, before I started my own firm. And that is no longer have a contract with an employer. You do have a compact. And the compact is, we will give you an opportunity to make a contribution. We will decide how long you are here to make that contribution, but we will also do our best to equip you so you can move on to another opportunity.
Sure.
And so we're moving in the direction of the contingent workforce.
Sure, especially in the technology sector, I think we see a lot of that with up and coming talent, because they want to go to certain companies, get certain experiences, but the company knows they're not going to stay indefinitely. Therefore, let's create a win-win. Both sides can milk it for all it's worth for a 2-3 year period.
Yeah.
But we see it in private equity as well, Rick, where we'll see, companies need a CFO, and they want a CFO who's been through, a capital raise and an exit, and maybe that might be a 3 or 4 year stint. And there are executives who that's what they want to do, and they may move every 3 or 4 years, or they may, buy a condo in the next town. So, it's a bit of a mercenary thing, but there's a slice of people that want to work on that basis. So it is a very different world than it was when we were younger.
You folks are really, those of you in the executive recruiting business, retained search, you've got a real problem because of the talent pool. It just isn't there. So what's happening? And is it being impacted by immigration, or are we now looking offshore to fill C-level positions because we don't have the talent in this country?
Well, global companies are absolutely looking internationally because their needs are global, and we're seeing more and more of that. And there's a number of CEOs of large companies now today who are who come from other countries, right? So, but the talent pool in general, I think, is going to continue to be stretched for executive talent, in part because the needs of the job are so much more complicated, regardless of the industry. Not only do you need a lot of proficiency around that industry and great customer relation skills, but you need a lot more cultural agility, to manage the workforce and to understand your potential customers. You need more adaptability, flexibility, because environments and markets change so much more quicker than they used to, and you need to be able to attract that talent into the company, articulate that vision across the organization. So I'm not worried about the future of the executive search business because of, I think, long meaning over the next 10 years, the supply of A-caliber senior executives, whatever the function industry, will mostly not exceed the demand. So I think it's an upward slope. I think there's up and downs within that upward slope, but I think at the levels that we work and that other high-level retained search firms work, I don't think that business gets disintermediated, by all the technology, because they've been saying that for 20 years when Monster came out and Career Builder came out, and those companies are doing fine. But they haven't got rid of the recruiting business. The recruiting business is robust. Companies are hiring recruiters as fast as they can.
Well, I hope you'll continue to be able to carve out some of your time and expertise to assist entrepreneurs, because they do need the counsel and the wisdom of those of us who have been around and have some historical perspective on the changes that are occurring in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, at least in this region. It's been a delight to have you. Thank you very, very much for being here.
My pleasure, Rick.
My guest today is Alan Kaplan, who's the founder and CEO of Kaplan Partners, an executive search firm based in Philadelphia. There is a website, right?
KaplanPartners.com.
www.kaplanpartners.com. Until next time, this is the Entrepreneurs Network. I am Rick Anthony. Take very good care of yourselves